All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Have you ever wondered why some brilliantly smart people go completely broke, while perfectly average folks somehow manage to build massive generational wealth? Well, you're in the right place, because today we're unpacking why your financial success is overwhelmingly dictated by human psychology and emotional control, not just cold hard mathematics. We're going to break down the core concepts from the incredibly eye-opening source material on the psychology of money. I promise you, by the time we wrap this up, the way you look at a simple dollar bill is going to be completely transformed. Let's get started. So let's kick things off with a pretty wild contrast between two very different men. First, we have Ronald Read. Ronald lived a completely unglamorous, totally normal life. He worked as a janitor, sweeping floors, spent his days fixing cars at a local gas station, just an everyday guy. Then we have Richard Fuscone. Now, Richard is what most of us picture when we think of absolute success. We're talking an elite Harvard education, vice chairman of a massive multinational company, and a guy who lived in a sprawling mansion with 11 bathrooms. Logically, you'd assume Richard was financially untouchable, right? While Ronald was probably just scraping by. But here is the absolute shocker. When Ronald Read, that humble janitor, passed away in 2014, he had accumulated an astonishing $8 million. And no, he wasn't some undercover financial genius. He just consistently saved and invested his money over 42 years. Meanwhile, what happened to the elite executive? Well, Richard Fiscone went completely bankrupt. During the 2008 financial crash, he lost absolutely everything, and that magnificent 11-bathroom mansion was foreclosed on. So, what's the real takeaway here? It's that making and, more importantly, keeping money isn't about pure intelligence, elite degrees, or complex mathematical formulas. It's entirely about your psychological behavior and your emotional control. Ronald didn't have some fancy spreadsheet predicting the future. He just had patience, humility, and discipline. Richard, on the other hand, had all the math skills in the world, but his financial psychology and his appetite for risk completely destroyed him. Basically, no one is crazy when it comes to money, but our behaviors are what ultimately define our wealth. Okay, moving right along to concept number 1, the massive role of luck and experience. Think about this for a second. Your birth year actually hardwires your financial brain. Imagine someone born in 1950. During their most formative investing years, the stock market was essentially dead. I mean, it literally went nowhere. Now contrast that with someone born in 1970, who came of age watching the market explode and grow 10 times in value. Neither of these people is crazy for how they view investing. They're just basing their massive financial decisions on completely different personal experiences. You know when your parents tell you to get a safe government job instead of starting a business? That's not them being stubborn. That's just their lived experience talking. And then there's luck. Take a guy like Bill Gates. Yes, absolutely, he worked incredibly hard. But consider this massive stroke of luck. In 1968, he just happened to attend one of the very few schools in the entire world that had a computer. But there is a darker side to this coin, and that's risk. Bill Gates actually had a friend named Kent Evans, who was arguably even smarter and just as passionate about computing. But tragically, Kent died in a mountaineering accident before graduation. Bill experienced a 1 in a million stroke of luck. Kent experienced a 1 in a million tragic risk. Both of these forces shape our financial outcomes just as much as hard work does. All right, let's dive into concept number 2, the sheer magic of compounding and something called tail events. We all know Warren Buffett is one of the richest investors alive, right? But listen to this number. If Warren Buffett had 100 rupees today, an astonishing 95 of those rupees were generated entirely after his 65th birthday. It's wild to think about. He didn't just stumble upon some magic formula in his 20s. He's literally a master of compounding time. He's been investing for over 3/4 of a century. People are always trying to copy his specific stock picks, but they totally fail to copy his most powerful asset, just leaving the money alone for decades to let compounding do all the heavy lifting. And this ties perfectly into the idea of tail events. Think of Hans, an art collector. Hans was super famous for acquiring incredibly valuable art. But when you zoom out and look at his entire portfolio, 99% of the paintings he bought were completely worthless duds. But that tiny 1% slice, that was a Picasso. In investing, you can literally be wrong half the time, or even 99% of the time. But if you have a few massive winners, those rare tail events, they pay for all your mistakes and still make you spectacularly wealthy. You really don't have to be right every single time. And next up, concept number 3, and this is a big one, getting wealthy versus actually staying wealthy. Take the brilliant Jesse Livermore. Back in the day, he was known as the world's greatest trader. During the huge market crash of 1929, when literally everyone else was losing their shirts, Jesse made an unfathomable $100 million. He successfully got incredibly wealthy. But he lost every single penny just 4 years later and tragically ended his own life in a hotel room. Why? Well, because the extreme risk-taking and aggressive confidence that helped him get wealthy were the exact same traits that completely destroyed him when it came time to keep it. The harsh truth is, to keep your money, you've got to flip a switch. You have to abandon the massive risk-taking that got you rich in the first place. Staying wealthy actually requires extreme frugality, a healthy, constant dose of fear that things could go wrong at any moment, and maintaining a really strict margin of safety. You simply have to assume life is unpredictable. If your investments drop by 90%, which, let's be honest, nobody ever thinks will happen until it suddenly does, your margin of safety is the only thing that prevents you from being wiped out completely. Okay, moving to concept 4, visible wealth versus true freedom. Have you ever heard of the man in the car paradox? It's this fascinating psychological trap. Basically, when you see someone driving a shiny new Ferrari down the street, the driver thinks everyone is staring at them in total admiration. But the reality? Nobody actually cares about the driver. People are just looking at the car and imagining themselves driving it. Buying flashy things just to gain respect is a massive trap. People aren't admiring you. They're literally just using your visible wealth to fantasize about their own success. And if you want to see the horrific price of letting that desire for more get totally out of hand, look at Rajat Gupta. He was the highly respected CEO of McKinsey. He had a personal net worth of $100 million. He even partnered with Bill Gates on big philanthropic projects. But $100 million just wasn't enough. He desperately wanted the social status of being a billionaire. That uncontrollable greed pushed him to commit insider trading, risking absolutely everything he had built. So instead of becoming a billionaire, he ended up in a prison cell. He sacrificed incredible invisible wealth, his actual freedom, for the fleeting illusion of more visible wealth. Which brings us to our fifth and final core concept, the true wealth formula. If there is one single thing you take away from this entire explainer, it boils down to this incredibly simple formula. Saving equals income minus ego. Building wealth isn't really about how high your salary is, it's about aggressively controlling your ego. It's about refusing to buy that brand new Fortuner or upgrading to a giant mansion just to show off to neighbors you probably don't even like. Think back to Ronald Reed, the janitor we talked about at the very beginning. His income was incredibly low, but his ego was absolutely zero. And because of that, his savings rate was massive. So how do you actually execute this formula in the real world? Well, you play the long game. When the market drops and things get volatile, your brain is going to scream at you to panic and sell. But you have to view those market crashes not as a fine for making a mistake, but simply as the fee you pay for long-term admission to the wealth-building theme park. Plus, you absolutely must ignore what those flashy day traders are doing. They are playing a completely different game with totally different timelines. Stop copying them, block out the noise, and relentlessly play your own long-term game. Wrapping up here, I want you to think back to the incredible difference in fate between that humble, patient janitor and the greedy, risk-taking executive. It really puts things into perspective. I have to leave you with this final, crucial thought. Are you chasing wealth with pure, cold logic, expecting math and spreadsheets to save you? Or are you finally ready to look inward, check your ego at the door, and master the psychology of your money? The choice, and ultimately your financial future, is entirely up to you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.